European Overwatch Champions Series is back, with Stage 3 groups beginning this week. We're officially at the halfway mark of OWCS Season 1, and the race towards Stockholm is now back on, with a couple of teams maybe being in a position, if they do well enough here, to clinch their tickets and not have to lift a finger in Stage 4. But if they intend to get there, first, they've got to get through the group stage portion, which brings us to today. Whether you're new or old to the OW esports scene, today I'm going to give you a breakdown of everything you need to know about OWCS EU Stage 3 groups. So Stage 3 is going to be a cut and paste of Stages 1 and 2. It's not going to follow the format that we saw in Esports World Cup. Instead, we'll start with 16 rosters on the groups. 2 of them from each of those groups will then move on to the double elimination 8-team bracket to decide who wins Stage 3 and reaps the rewards. As for the 16 rosters that are going into groups, they are as follows. I'll put them up on the screen for you right now. 12 of these teams made it through via the Swiss stage, just like we saw during Stages 2 and 1. However, they're implementing a similar rule that we saw with Korea, where the top 4 from the previous stage all made it here automatically, that being SSG, ENCE, Gaming Gladiators, and Oblivione, formerly known as Peace and Love. So yeah, over the next 2 weeks, these guys are gonna go head-to-head in their separate groups with hopes of making it onto the main stage event, which will go all the way until the beginning of September. The standings still have a lot of room to change, and there's still some opportunities here for these teams to make up some lost ground. The group should be very entertaining. Before diving into the matchups and what these rosters look like, I think it's first necessary to go out there and give you an update of the EU standings so you know where things stand and where the importance lies with this graphic. So you need to direct your attention to the top 2, Space Station and ENCE, who have a pretty lead over the rest of their competition right now. Those 2 spots are of the utmost importance, as the top 2 from EMEA with the most total points are automatically at the end of this season going to Stockholm. They don't have to worry about fighting for anything else. As for everybody else who falls short of this benchmark, they'll be fighting for one single spot. There's only 3 available total from EU, and the winner of Stage 4 is going to claim that 3rd and final spot. Right now, that's not going to be that important, but we're setting ourselves up. We're setting the stage for that later on by getting through this one. And that basically brings me full circle to my reference I made earlier, the whole not having to lift a finger thing. Space Station and ENCE are in that situation potentially if they can just even make the finals here in Stage 3. In Stage 4, they'll only have to finish decently, and there'll be no hope of anybody catching up to them. They can put more of their focus towards Stockholm and the bigger opponents they'll have to prepare for. But who knows? It's a new stage. Anything can happen. Let's see what they've got and what they're going up against. Let's start it off with Group A, Space Station's group, the #1 finisher from Stage 2. It's them, Hypnos, Ohana Aloha, and Vendetta. 3 new aliases that have never made it to the big stage before. Do any of them even stand a chance of pushing SSG? Unfortunately, the answer, we all know, is probably not. We know this SSG team by now. It's the same since the very beginning of OWCS. They've been dominant beasts out there, consistently have been the best in EU for literal months right now. And it's just such a great team that has so much synergy and clutch factor behind it. We know what these guys can do, and it's just a matter of seeing how they play up to the rest of the competition once they get past this group. However, regardless of how many teams get absolutely pounded by SSG, there's still one other spot available, and it feels like it could go a couple of different ways. I've got my eye on 2 teams that I think have a pretty good chance of making it through. The first of which is Vendetta, which just has a well-balanced roster. These 5 players all have shown great flashes throughout their career at some point, and I think it all starts with that DPS line. China and Cookie are not bad at all. China, you may remember from some previous stages on DM Pero. He had some great plays on the Tracer, and Cookie seems to be a pretty boomer-bust hit scan that can hang in there with even some of the best of them. Not to mention, that backline is nothing to scoff at. Crispy and Level 1 Crook, both guys that have been around the scene for a while. Level 1 Crook was a really reliable flex support for Team Peps / Gaming Gladiators literally last stage before they kicked him off in favor of Yoham. There's a lot of good pieces to this team, but obviously something that sticks out like a sore thumb is their tank hybrid. You may remember him as the meme DPS player for London Spitfire back in the day. His tank journey continues. We first saw it on Team Peps, I believe in Stage 1, where he's mostly just playing an okay Doomfist. Seems like he's ready to be fully converted to this role, and I'm interested to see what he can bring to the table with more experience on this role now. You're looking at him as the primary factor on how far this team can truly go. He's probably going to be the one that decides if they make it out of this group or not. If he can just be reliable and stay out of trouble at the very least, or show some exponential growth, this team's in great shape. If they end up having to garner strategies to certain ways just to suit his playstyle though, that's where things could get a little dicey. The team they're likely looking to get through would be Hypnos. This organization has been trying to make it here for a couple of stages now. They've been consistently making that top 16, top 20, but they always seemed to have missed the cutoff until today. After a lot of grinding and various roster changes, they've got their shot. Oh, and I mean a lot of roster changes, as none of these new players have been on the team for any more than a month. There's a lot of unproven talent here. You got a wild Captain Prash appearance, and for whatever reason, MCD is on yet another random EU team because I guess why not? I mean, he's a decent asset. He's not going to be a horrible player for them, but there's an odd mix of players on this team, and I don't know if it's going to come together or not. These two finished very close together in the Swiss, and they just might be around the same power level. I don't know why I said power level, I'm making this a Dragon Ball reference, but you get my point. They're maybe around the same level skill-wise, so that could be the deciding factor. That matchup is the one I'm looking towards to decide who makes it out alongside SSG into that final. In Group B, the second place finisher, ENCE, is going to be paired up alongside OWCS, MetaBoys, and WASP-X. Oh no, what an interesting name. So the question is, does anyone stand a chance against ENCE like what we were saying with SSG? The answer is definitely no. They probably breeze through these groups without even having to blink twice. But there are some interesting things to look at with ENCE, both in this small group stage as well as onward, as they did add a new main support player to the roster, that being former Twisted Minds plus many other random EU teams' main support, Calyx. There are three constants in this world: Death, Taxis, and Calyx playing Overwatch. This man's been around since 2016, he just can't get enough. Yet another very brief retirement for this dude, but in all seriousness, it may not be a bad pickup at all. It has questions around it on what's going to happen with Masa, but there's no denying that Calyx right before his retirement on Twisted Minds was playing some of the best Overwatch we've ever seen from the guy. If he's able to bring some of that energy to ENCE, who could use a bit of a boost, that could be massive for their level of play, and maybe it could be the thing that makes them just a bit more stable and a bit more consistent and could give them that edge finally over their rivals. Hate on the guy if you want, but there's no denying that he's seemingly always in high demand by some of the most relevant EU teams we have ever seen in the history of the game. Maybe him and SrPej will provide new life to a backline that weren't always holding their own beforehand when it was up to Ghost and Masa. Also worth monitoring if you didn't watch Esports World Cup is that Vaimon is now on the team as a third option on DPS. He got a lot of quality playtime in that tournament, and he seemed to do very well. Seems like a pretty seamless fit. So ENCE right now are retooled, and they're ready to go. And once again, I'm looking at two teams to potentially join a juggernaut outside of the groups. I'm looking at OWCS and MetaBoys. Both teams are rather familiar with the groups at this point, as they've already been a part of this process. OWCS is one of the clear-cut fan favorites. Everybody loves these guys. They're a pretty decent team from top to bottom, but they have some of the most exciting players that just play such a different style of Overwatch. Chasm, the ball god himself, could be back out there yet again for this team, pulling off his shenanigans. Unfortunately, his partner in crime, Kaya, has moved over to an analyst. He will not be playing any games this go-around, which is mighty unfortunate, but generally, still a pretty good team, and they pulled off an upset during the previous stage to make it out of groups. So we know that they're no stranger to being clutch when they need to, and if I were to put money on it, I'd have a lot of confidence in these guys to do it yet again. But maybe this time Meta Boys will be the ones to make it through instead. They've also been a pretty consistent staple of the Swiss stages and even in the groups as well. A primarily Polish core, they've been sticking together for a long time. Recently, they've expanded. They've had a couple of different players from different nationalities into the mix. And with all this patience and experience they've been gaining, maybe now is the right time for these guys to strike. Group C is where things maybe get a bit more interesting, the Game and Gladiators group, as we're going to see them go head-to-head with Twisted Minds. Game and Gladiators have shown some significant growth since the beginning of Stage 1, and their team has really come into its own, with guys like exoDIAL and Naga proven to be one of the better DPS lines you could possibly form in Europe. Although it is worth mentioning, they have a different flex support this go-around. Like I said, level 1 Crook is off, and now Yohem is in as the full-time starter. Is that going to change the way the team plays? We'll have to see, but generally, still in pretty good shape. I've liked how they've played as a team. They seem very competent. They can even give some of the better teams a run for their money when they're really playing up to their fullest potential. Not to mention that they're in a pretty good place with Tread as their tank player. It gives them a lot of options on what they can run. He's not a super meta-dependent player, which is big for your tank. So Game and Gladiators seem like they're in a great position to once again get through the groups and be super relevant come playoff time. But getting first in the group certainly will not be easy, as that just might go to Twisted Minds instead, a team that some people have kind of forgotten about thanks to their fall off in Stage 2 and in Dallas. There were some big time struggles after the whole roster dilemma happened, but it seems like they're finally back. They looked very strong in Esports World Cup, even handily defeating Team once again and taking a map off of Falcons of all people. They finally found their tank with TVNT. Seems like they are a lot more comfortable playing around him than anything they've had post-KSA, and Bliss and Vigilante are starting to fill the hole left behind by a relatively consistent backline for this group. And with Quartz and Yubi still there to make some big plays on DPS, Twisted Minds just might be giving everybody in this group a serious run for their money. These guys are so back, and I'm expecting them to be right in the thick of it with Game and Gladiators. While those two are the favorites, I also just wanted to bring up a one-man army, as they may be somewhat relevant here. They have a fun-looking team that's very different, with Top Dragon and Donghoon randomly being on here, because why not? You may recognize Avo as well, the former World Cup player in 2023 for Team France. It's such a weird mix of players, but I'm oddly excited to watch them play. It's just such an odd team, and I'm so curious to see if they have any kind of chance of coming together. Like, you have Top Dragon and Donghoon probably playing on ping. Pretty sure both of them are relatively good at English. That won't be a problem, but everyone's just so all over the place with this team. So they're just going to be chaotic more than anything else, I feel like. But I'm hoping they can go out there and give us a show, bare minimum, because again, they've got some pretty awesome fan favorites here. Speaking of fan favorites, we can't forget about Group D. This is looking like the most exciting one on paper, kind of the group of death, so to speak. It's led by the 4th highest finisher in Stage 2, Oblivione. Again, this used to be the team known as Peace and Love, but Exo, the org, picked them up. It's essentially the same team that we saw during that time, but with a couple of minor changes to the team. The unfortunate one, in my opinion, is the loss of Psycho, the Norwegian DPS player. He put on some great performances for them, and he is a major reason why they were able to step into that top 4 position. So it's going to be on these other DPS players to pick up the slack, and with someone like Lauren being really inconsistent in the previous stage, I'm hoping he can give it his A game this time, because they are going to need it. I like that it's basically the same core as what we saw previously. According to Abik, the team's former flex support, they're basically just a group of friends that are going out there with the power of friendship and doing their best. I'm not worried about them getting boomed or not having the synergy or anything like that. I'm just worried about the level of skill in this group, as there's some pretty nasty teams involved. The most noteworthy being virtuouspro. These guys went on a tear in the Esports World Cup qualifiers and even managed to take a map off of Team Falcons when they were actually there in the tournament itself. This team might be the 4th best in EU. In my opinion, they probably are. This is a strong roster. I mean, Shockwave and Sana might be the best DPS line outside of the big 3. Gala and Canale, one of the most underappreciated yet consistent backlines in all of Overwatch. That looks like the team to beat. Not invincible by any stretch, but just from a roster to roster comparison, you like the way they stack up against everybody in this group. But just because you favor them doesn't mean it's not going to be exhausting to make it through, as SrPej is another team that could be in contention for that top 2 spot. A team that also did relatively well in EU Stage 2 and made it through the group stage, and actually proved to be a really good adversary for the current alexyOWL team back when they were peace and love. They played one of the closest 3-1s you'll ever see in your life. Considering you've had all that time to remember that match and you have the opportunity for revenge, and you're still the same team as you were before then, with a good DPS line like Pac and Stelios to lead the way, I would not count out SrPej in this race. I think that it's like a 50-50 between them and EXO right now. This is not a cut and dry group at all. But honestly, there's some more chaos within the timeline that could be added here. I've avoided talking about them so far, but SrPej are getting back into the action. LH Cloudy is back after an extended break as part of ENCE and their whole content creation and coaching thing. He's got the itch to play Ryan in an ultra-competitive setting again, and you best believe him and his team are going to bring absolute pandemonium to this group. It seems like the silly group of one-tricks that you probably won't have too much of an issue beating, but they remind me a lot of the London Spitfire the last couple of years, where they just play so vastly different compared to everybody else that you may not have an actual way to prepare for them, and sometimes, after a tough loss, that could be tough to go up against. That's something that could seriously catch one of these teams off guard after their first match, and they end up getting eliminated from the group early. Am I expecting any miracles? Am I expecting SrPej to get top 2 in their group? No. But it's certainly in the realm of possibilities, because even though this is going to be the meme team, you know what they're going to play, it's going to be Ryan for fun, they still have a pretty solid team around Cloudy here. These guys have a high skill level. I wouldn't doubt for this team to somehow make an upset go their way. It seems legitimately possible, even if they're more so the underdogs in this position. But let me tell you, they're certainly not going to be unpopular, as everybody and their mother who's a Reinhardt main is going to join Cloudy's cause. They're all going to hope that he can get through and enforce Ryan onto the rest of the world and not conform to whatever meta they'll be playing in this situation. It's going to be glorious to watch that Reinhardt gameplay. The memes will be plentiful, and I'm excited to see if this team can make any of their sets competitive. And those are the groups. I know I didn't highlight all of the teams, but those are the ones that seem the most interesting in terms of their relevance and or their ability to make it out of the groups and get to the next round. As for how I see these groups going and what my predictions look like, I'll throw them up on screen for you real quick. In Group A, Space Station obviously get through. The second spot is where things could get a bit complicated. I'm pretty torn between Hypnos and Vendetta, but ultimately I went with Vendetta as I think they have the more reliable talent overall, even though I am a bit concerned about the hybrid tank. In Group B, I feel like you gotta go with ENCE and OWCS. They're just the more reliable teams in this situation. Metaboys maybe have an outside shot of getting through OWCS, but I just like their team more right now. It's a little sad they don't have the Junkrat God Kaya there, but if anything, that might make them a bit more reliable. They won't always be depending on his playstyle 24/7, so we may actually see a somewhat improved version of this team, and they're very experienced in these scenarios already, so they'll make it out. In Group C, unfortunately, it's just 2 powerhouses. Gaming Gladiators and Twisted Minds are your top 2 for sure, but the order could be very dependent on the meta and what compositions these 2 teams are comfortable playing. If it's more of a diva setting, like I think it could be with that dive, like if they can get away with playing her consistently and the other things TVNT is good at, I like Twisted Minds. I think their team is just better overall. But if we see more of the Winston Tracer stuff, then maybe there's a chance for Gaming Gladiators to take the edge instead. I think their match should be a good one, could go the distance, but I'm going with Twisted Minds as my number 1 team. Then there's the Group of Death, Group D. Outside of virtuouspro, I think I'm gonna stick with ExOblivione as the number 2 team. I'm really unsure here because SrPej, it feels like the revenge is right there for them to take. I wouldn't be shocked at all, but just knowing the past execution, I think I feel a bit more comfortable with this EXO team, but we'll have to see. I feel like virtuouspro should be able to win this group and be kind of standing head and shoulders above everybody else, but that fight for that second spot could be an absolute bloodbath, and I'm pumped to see how things go. But that's pretty much all I've got for you guys. That's my thought process and rundown of the EU Stage 3 groups. Let me know what you think down in the comments section, and if you think there's going to be any surprises early on here. And if you enjoyed the video and you want more Overwatch esports content just like this here on the channel, give this video a thumbs up and subscribe to the channel if you're new. I've been ATP, and I'll catch you in the next video. Peace.